It's very straightforward, and it's a weekly thing. I didn't do it, even though I taught twice a week. I didn't do it twice. I didn't do it for them twice a week. I made it once a week,
Only
and
once a
they
week.
were allowed to skip two if something happens. So they did, and then I went, or TAs went through that, and I just marked it as either yes or no type of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it a try. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I couldn't even figure out how to do it at the beginning. It took me about 3 or 4 weeks until I figured out how to make Canvas work for me that way.
Yep.
Jennifer had a question in the chat, which is nicely matching the modality. Can you give an example of a question you would have people answer in the chat thread?
Um, what is citizen journalism, for example, from the reading they did, or we looked at society of spectacle. So give me an example of society and spectacle that was not mentioned in the reading. And then for that I would have to wait like 2 or 3 minutes for them to kind of to wrap their brain around, and but it would be worth it because that it shows application right away. It's a lot of work. I have to say, it's a lot of work, and I didn't do it every single week. There were weeks for my there were weeks when we did different things. So I didn't do it all throughout. I would do it maybe two classes, and then take a break, and do other things like lectures or student presentations, etc., depending on the level, and then I would go back. But we did really neat things, like my 200 level students towards the end did the video analysis. I asked them to look at the kind of idea of instructional video on art history, and look at, and then kind of take it apart, and we had a really interesting discussion about media. It was good. I'll do it again.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alla. We'll keep moving, but that's a rich seam, and I know that people are going to benefit from this going forward as well. So I'm really grateful to you.
Thank you.
Jennifer and Melanie, over to you.
Okay, so in rock, paper, scissors, I won to speak for Melanie and I today, but we really want to speak a little bit about a project that we really developed together, and that, as Jim mentioned earlier, is something that we've kind of shared across the department, and people are integrating it in different ways, and it's kind of gained some momentum, and that's been fun. I don't have slides like Ala did, so we can all just see ourselves, see one another as we go. And because I want to stick to time, I am going to read what I prepared, but I'll do my best to do that in my most conversational voice. Um, so the project that we wanted to share with you is an assignment that we call the Immigrant Ethnographic Portrait Project. And Melanie and I originally designed it really with a threefold aim: to familiarize our students with social science research methods, to facilitate their deeper understanding of migration by connecting our course readings and our intro classes to a hands-on project, and to humanize immigrants by bringing students into one-on-one conversations where they would hear one person's personal story in their own words. And we use this project in general in our Anth 100 Introduction to Cultural Anthropology courses, which typically have about 60 students enrolled. So these classes are on the larger side. So a lot of the instruction is done lecture style, and then students are working on progressive projects as they go. So to support our students' success with the project, and to ensure as far as is possible that they do no harm since they're speaking to people, we provide a lot of instruction and feedback through this series of assignments that are spaced over the course of the semester. And in the tradition of the teacher scholar model, the project for Melanie and I allows us to bring our research expertise on Latin American immigration into our classroom teaching, which we really like to be able to do. So our goals include helping students understand the globalized environmental and economic phenomena that compel mass migrations in the contemporary era, and providing them an opportunity to learn about really the life-altering consequences that people experience when they migrate. So I want to walk through each of the steps of the project by assignment, and then I have a couple of kind of learning takeaways, and then I'm happy to share screen with our assignment itself if anyone's interested in that, and we can answer questions. So to start out our project, we like to show in class the StoryCorps founder Dave Issay's 2015 TED Prize talk, which is titled "Everyone Around You Has a Story the World Needs to Hear." It's a really beautiful 15-minute discussion where Issay makes a really compelling argument for sharing a conversation with someone and asking them candid questions about their life. And in that talk, he uses excerpted recordings from StoryCorps interviews, which if you listen to NPR on Friday mornings, you've probably heard before. And he illustrates how conversations can be really deeply meaningful for both interviewers and interviewees. We encourage students to think about their own interviews from that frame of mind, so that it's both an intellectual endeavor, but also something that can be very valuable and meaningful to them and the person they speak with. Sometimes we have to encourage them to be courageous, because it can be quite intimidating, they find sometimes, to recruit someone, approach someone, and ask to interview them. So to equip them with strategies and guidelines for conducting this research with human participants, we teach a lesson after that on the tenets of ethical research, focusing on anthropological commitments to do no harm, be open and honest about our work, and obtain informed consent. So we encourage students to look for potential interviewees among extended family or friendship networks, and to ask family or friends for help, maybe with an introduction, if they can't think off the top of their head of someone they know in their social network who is an immigrant. But using these strategies, most students are able to recruit and successfully interview most often an immediate or extended family member, a roommate, a teammate, a fellow club member on campus sometimes, a parent of a friend, the coworker of a parent. It kind of goes two steps of connection out, a former teacher or a hometown neighbor. In our discussion of ethical practice, when we do that lesson, we remind students to keep in mind the ask that they're making of interviewees, and we suggest maybe acknowledging interviewees' time and their educational labor with a thank you note or a small gift, something like that. So once we've given students a couple weeks to recruit and find an interviewee, we teach a lesson on how to design a semi-structured interview. So students learn effective language for crafting open-ended questions, and they learn to recognize and revise leading questions. Lots of the questions that students first draft will get them yes, no answers. So we teach them how to ask a question that will elicit a story or elicit an opinion about something. We present best practices for asking about potentially sensitive topics. And when we do that, we also remind students that the principle to do no harm applies to the questions that they ask people. So we remind them to be cautious about not soliciting information that could be detrimental to their interviewee. For example, don't ask about immigration status. Right. So after we've had them design their interview questions and we have them submit those, Melanie also gives them kind of a base of set of interview questions that they can use to build on, so that they're not starting with a blank page. And after they've designed their questions, we talk about skills for conducting successful interviews. So students learn strategies for putting interviewees at ease. We emphasize the importance of having their interview guide prepared ahead of time, including a script for confirming consent at the outset and how to close an interview with opportunities to invite the person to speak about anything you haven't asked about. I also, Joe, since you're here, I'll point to, I always mention a suggestion that you gave me when I was talking to you about filming and interviews, that I tell students to, when they're ready to sit down for their interview before they start, to close their eyes and listen for ambient noise. Because if you're recording an interview, you know, our human cognition is able to kind of filter out ambient noise, but on your recording, when you listen to it later, if there's dogs barking or a TV going, it's hard to hear people's voices. So I teach them about how to set up the environment, where we teach them about how to set up the environment, set things up for success. So we also give students a set of versatile probe questions to work with recalcitrant interviewees. So we teach them to ask things like, can you tell me more about that? Can you give me an example, or what makes you think so? And then we send them off to do their interviews. And oftentimes, if it's in the fall, they'll do these over the Thanksgiving break when they're able to be home and meet with someone maybe in their hometown face to face, and then they come back afterwards. And our last lesson, we start by doing a little bit of debriefing about how interviews go. Sometimes we have students who are brave and admit to gaffes or things that happen that were hard to handle, and everyone encourages them. And we talk a little bit about how do you recover when unexpected things happen. And but it, you know, without fail, we have students who say, I was so surprised by what I heard. This wasn't something I anticipated. This really helped me to change my frame of thinking about these things. So we find that really helpful. So then we teach students how to listen back through their interview recordings and start to think about what are the things they want to distill from that to write what we call an ethnographic portrait essay, in which they're really tying together that interviewee's personal experience to some of the concepts and theories that we're talking about in terms of immigration in the course. So I'll close with some lessons we've learned in teaching this project, and I'm not sure where I am on time, but I'll take just like 2 more minutes. So in order for the project to be effective, we've found that it's really important that students view their interviewees' experiences as exemplar cases of larger, broader, more complex phenomena. The kind of the default sometimes is for students to write up a biography. So we have to help them move beyond just kind of simply telling a biographical story to really thinking about what are the socio-historical, political factors that have shaped what immigration was like for this particular individual. So by the time students are conducting their interviews, we have covered thematic course units on race and racism, on ethnicity, on class, as well as a dedicated immigration unit that focuses on inequities in the global political economy. So we try and help them tie those things to the personal story that they heard. 2 key readings that we use that really are helpful, we find. One is Karen Brodkin-Sachs' article, How Did Jews Become White Folks? And Ruth Gomberg-Munoz's piece, Grounds for Exclusion, the US Immigration System. Both are really critical resources for disabusing students of bootstrap explanations about white European immigrant success and familiarizing students with the exclusionary racial logic on which our history of US immigration policy has been based. So we encourage students to consider interviewees' experiences in light of those sorts of things. So just to close, the feedback we've received from students about the assignment has been overwhelmingly positive. In course evaluations and ethnographic portrait essays, many students identify the project as the highlight of the course and sometimes the highlight of their semester. Some people report that interviewees challenged them to reassess some of their preconceived ideas. One student said, going into the interview, I had a few unsupported assumptions, and then went on to talk about what they learned. Other students expressed awe at human resilience through the process of migration. One student said, When I try to comprehend this reality, it boggles my mind the amount of people who do this migration across the globe. Another student said, I'd never talked to someone about their own migration, so this gave me the opportunity to hear about immigration from a new, more personal perspective. And many of the students attest that the project actually also deepened their understanding about people who they care about. One Salvadoran American student concluded in their paper, they said, during this interview, I saw a side of my father I never imagined he would show me. So these sorts of student responses have encouraged us and motivated us to continue honing this project and to continue using it, even as we change other components of our intro classes. So that is it. We're happy to answer questions. And Melanie, if I would love it if you want to help field questions.
Yes, definitely.
Do you use any film? Do you encourage your students to watch films, like feature films? And would you recommend something?
Melanie.
Yeah, I have my students watch Who is Diane Cristal, which is a docu-drama. So it's like a slightly fictionalized migrant journey, where it intersperses Gael Bernal playing the role of a migrant worker with actual interviews with forensic anthropologists who work on border deaths in Arizona. And then I have a suggested list of more documentaries than fiction-based films, but I'm happy to send it to you. I'm happy to share it with everybody.
That would be great. Thank you. Yeah.
I'll note that our Films on Demand library actually has quite a bit of short, films on migration that not all the content is amazing, but there's quite a few options there too.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to say that I started doing immigration as a component of Anthropology 100 after the 2016 election. I'm an immigrant. There's obvious reasons there. And I was looking for assignments, and I've done other assignments, but what I am seeing is that powerful emotional component of this, people connecting with their 94-year-old grandparents and asking them about their immigration experiences, is turning out to be just profound for students and actually quite moving to read. So it's been a lot more interesting for me to read these assignments than it would be to read a more scholarly essay on immigration.
I kind of want to just point out that even though we're anthropologists and we're trained in doing interviews, and this is kind of very like disciplines, might seem discipline specific, I do think that anyone, natural sciences, humanities, social sciences, could have an interview component that allows for a little bit more interaction and community building, even if it's with an expert in the field, or so I think that while we focused on doing life history interviews with immigrants, that the interview model and teaching students and encouraging even freshmen, 100 level students, to be doing that type of applied learning is it's doable with a lot of structure. You had to build in a lot of structure into the course.
Melanie, that was something I was thinking, was that it's really teaching students a lot of basic communication skills too. And something it seems like our students struggle with a little bit right now. I mean, there's a lot of anxiety in, say, approaching professors, going to office hours, and just practicing these skills in a very structured, formal way might help with that.
I'll say I just posted, and it looks like my link came through. Maybe it's not the right thing. I thought I had posted the link to Melanie and Gwen Faulkner, and I actually wrote up this assignment and published it in a pedagogical journal, an anthro journal, and I tried to post the PDF, but I think it came through wrong. Okay, so Melanie, I'll get that. Another thing I would say is thinking about broader applications for this assignment. When we have students watch the TED Talk, ISSE recommends the use of the StoryCorps app. There's actually an interviewing app that's available for StoryCorps, and he asks people to do interviews, and then they can upload them with that app directly to the StoryCorps archive, which is archived at the, oh goodness, where is it archived? Melanie, help me out here. Is it the
Library of Congress.
The Library of Congress? Yeah, so some students do that and it becomes part of the archive of like US history, and so there's really a nice application that way.